Hello everybody, welcome to episode 8 of Setting the Scene. I'm your host, David. Well, it's been 8 weeks and these videos have been really enjoyable to make. And we're 8 weeks in, no battle reports, which is a real shame. But don't worry, it seems like there might be an end on the horizon and we might be able to get a game together very, very soon. Obviously taking all the correct precautions and various other bits and bobs. But yeah, in the background I am working on a game for you guys, hopefully in a couple of weeks. I'll get to watch that. But in the meantime, we're going to go back to setting the scene and we are going to build a scene ready for Firefight. Now, in Firefight, we are going to continue a unit versus that 10-man plasma support squad. The Thalax did really well, I think, in the previous episode. And now we're just going to build a little scene to set up the next assault from the Imperial Fists. Now, I'm going to go back to the Realm of Battle boards, which you've all seen on the channel, no doubt, from Forge World. In particular, this one I'm going to focus on. Now, this one's really great. It's like a large plaza. Has a really large raised area with the eagles at the front with the staircase. And then inside you've got this really humongous building. Now, as with all boards from Forge World, I'm not going to bash them too much because I've invested in their boards and I really do like them. But again, we've got a warpage issue. I've had these boards for about 4 years, I think now. I've tried multiple times to use the trick where I showed before with the Adeptus Titanicus tile, and they get straightened and then eventually just flop back into this kind of banana shape, which is highly frustrating. But hey, it is what it is. I'm not going to bash them too much. My only criticism of this particular piece is that I was going to say because it's really big, but it's good that it's really big because you can create quite a cool scene on it. But my main gripe, I guess, is these raised areas here. And I'll show you what I mean in a second about that. But other than that, it's absolutely fantastic. It's purposely been painted a very bland, boring grey with a few patches of brown on there. I think in hindsight, I could go back or I should have gone back and maybe and painted these bits in white perhaps, but as you guys know, I love a bland board, so here we are. All right, so we're going to pop this front and center into this board, into this little box here. Again, these boards aren't 2 foot square, highly frustrating, but here we are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this board now. It's great. It's got some really great detail in the bottom here. And if you wanted to take it even further, you could create your own floor and put like a checkered tile in there and paint them. I've seen lots of them painted black and white tiles, which are really cool. So you don't have to run with this one, of course. But the only problem with that is because it's not perfectly level and smooth, it does undulate a little bit. So you'd have to perhaps put some thick glue down there to bridge the gap between the flat board that you build and then the thing on top. But hey, you probably don't want to go into that much effort. The other thing about it is, and this is on the Adeptus Titanicus board as well, which I pointed out. Now, when you have buildings, whether they're Unreal Wargaming Studios terrain or whether it's Games Workshop terrain or the original Forge World terrain, you've got a choice here. You've got your building and you put it down. So do you put it within the confines of these walls? To me, the floor should have been at the top here. Try and get a better picture for you guys. The floor should have been flat. So anything you place on top of it is kind of level and it works. And particularly with these Unreal Wargaming Studio buildings, they've got these little fins like supports. And I appreciate these were made way before these. But the Games Workshop or Forge World buildings rather, they still had the very similar fins. These are based very heavily on that design. And so it just doesn't work for my liking because you have to then decide to place your buildings in the confines of it, which looks really weird. But then if you place it on top, it looks really weird as well. So, I do like these, but I just think that when these were produced, the designers did not bear in mind any Forge World or any current Games Workshop kits they had at the time. Just makes no sense to me. But hey, we find ourselves in this situation quite often with these Forge World boards. I think in theory they're great, but I think in reality they don't interact. And you have to scratch build everything to go on these boards, which some people don't have the ability to. I don't, for example. I think it's a lot of work because if you're going to spend £8 on a board, you just want to put it down, put some terrain in it and go for it. I appreciate there aren't that many people out there that are really as particular as me, that like things to work well with each other, but I think as a minimum standard they should. Anyway, enough bashing, I'm done with it, I promise. So what can you do to get around it? Well, you can make your own base. This is exactly what I did from some Foamex board. It's just literally multiple layers of Foamex, and then on the underside you can see there I've cut out these gaps, and that's to accommodate for where the rubble has, the designers have created the rubble into the surface here. So if you just put a flat surface or fat bit of Foamex rather on here, it won't work. So you have to make those cutouts. So, and you'll see that mine has a step, because on my board it's so warped that the front section is much lower further down. So I had to step it up, and then it fits flat on the surface, and it fits just like that, and it fits beautifully. Now I have got a big gap under here where the staircase, it kind of does that a little bit, but you see that on normal buildings where the stone has been eroded by the people walking up it over hundreds of years, and the stone does do that. Now that doesn't help us if we're trying to create a better foundation or floor for the building, but you can cover it up with a bit of rock and rubble and whatever else. Also, if, unlike me, you wanted it permanent, you could just stick that down and then fill that gap with some putty, and you would never know the wiser, and then sculpt some tiles into the front of the tile. But again, it goes back to the whole point of you've got to spend 80 odd quid on a board, and then you've got to spend a ton of hours, materials, time and labour on making it suitable to accept buildings, which is not cool. Anyway, so I've done both. I've made this completely removable because sometimes I want to just create a ruined section in which I'll just pop those on there and I'll fill it up with rubble and you won't notice it. Or, and I'll show you in a second, the building's just down here, I want a complete building because I like the idea of a little bit of damage on buildings, but I want a complete building almost to represent that it managed to avoid some of the bombing that happened in the city. And again, I could have done a detailed floor on this. The reason why I haven't is because the building that goes on top of this covers it entirely, and then I put a crater in the floor of it to look like the bombs come down and cratered it out. So you don't really see the detail on there. I think if you wanted to spend a bit more time at home, you could buy checkered squares from for a styrene or plastic card checkers, and you could put it on there and paint a design into it, or you could do a mosaic of some sort, or you can literally just etch a design into the floor, which would look absolutely fantastic. I didn't go that far because I knew it was going to get covered up 90% of the time. All right, so you've got your floor, pop that in. Now we've got this humongous building here, which I made, and you'll notice it's a complete building, well, semi-complete. The top floor is missing slightly, but it fits beautifully on here. And also you'll notice that these fins now, they fit on top of this outer section that is the molded board, and it fits much better. And I generally put it all the way to the back, so I've got a little bit of space here on the steps, and that is us. Looks great already. Now appreciate when we're going to do firefight, it's going to look a bit weird. We've got this massive building and the camera's not going to be able to see into here. So we're not worried about that. Literally the battle will take place on the foot of the steps of this large building. So this is purely a backdrop that we're building for the firefight that we're going to do next. Anyway, we've done that now. Now we go on a roof, because you do need a roof, but it needs to be removable so you can get your hands in to get your models in and out. And again, this is just Foamex sprayed black, a couple of colours of green on top. I think it's Strachan green and Elysian green with an airbrush. And as you can see, I've just cut out holes here for where the damage of the building is, and also here where the damage is at the back. That is my large building. Just a couple of things about the train. As I mentioned, it is from Unreal Wargaming Studios. Griff makes some fantastic train. It's super solid and it's quite simple in design. It's not. It's full of skulls and various other bits and bobs. Because I've opted for full structures and these kind of corner pieces here, I've drilled and pinned it. So along there's probably about 6 or 7 drill drill holes with 1mm nails, and then they correspond onto the other section, and I slot them together, tons of super glue, and they're absolutely solid. I've not had one break on me yet, so that's really good. So the whole thing, this is where it breaks in my hand, the whole thing is really, really solid, and it's been dropped a few times, and it's really great. So some really great terrain. If you haven't gone for this stuff and you've gone for the Games Workshop, or the new Games Workshop terrain is really great, it worked just as well, so no issue there at all. All right, so put the roof on, and that's my scene, but it does need a little bit of zhuzhing up, I believe the word is. So we're going to do that with some black aggregate, so some aquatic aggregate that goes in the bottom, and then in this little box here, which I shall show you, I've got a load of our friend Slayton stone, so we're going to use that to great effect. But the other thing I've forgotten is I'm going to get a couple of craters, and I'll grab those in a second, come back to you. All right, I'm back. Okay, again, craters are from Unreal Wargaming Studios. They come in 2 or 3 different styles, big, small, and there's a different shape one. These are just too small, and these literally just go where the hole in this building is. And I'll get a top-down photo later, right at the end of the video. You guys will be able to see that. So that will do, I think. Yep, that'll do nicely. And then all we're going to do now is just bolster the side of the building. So I'm going to have a quick clear down, and I'll back in a sec. All right, just a little bit of housekeeping helps keep things a little bit more, a little bit easier to move around in. So all I'm going to do is going to grab some stones here, and I'm just going to reinforce the rubble that's here already. There's already loads of it molded into the board, which looks great. I'm not going to do the back of the board because you'll never see it, and it won't play any part in this for the firefight next turn. I'm going to put it on quite liberally. Almost blends into the board because it, as I said, it's very grey, very dull, very boring. But all we're trying to do is just help merge or blend the building into where the platform is as well. So a little bit of adjustment there. That looks good. I know it looks weird right now, but it will look better. You know this anyway. You've seen me do this so many times. You're probably bored of it, to be fair. But I think a couple of minutes on this really does make a difference. There's a couple of little white rocks that have snuck in there, so we'll get rid of those. They don't look quite right. And then what we'll do is also we'll add some on the inside where the craters are, just to blend their line, because you've got this brown crater onto a grey surface, and it does look a bit weird. But we can sort that out. That looks a lot better already. All right, we're back. Sorry if there was a bit of jump in the footage there. I had a very minor technical issue there, which I had to just quickly sort. It's all sorted now. All right, so where was I? Yes, we're blending the lines between the brown boring crater against the grey boring floor. So we've done that now, and it looks looks a lot better. But to reinforce it, we're going to use this aggregate, and you've seen me do this before, and it's just a really gentle application. Nothing crazy, but just represents all the dust and all the rock and everything else that's just come out of that building. Oh, that's one thing I was mentioning as well, is, you know, when a building collapses, the floors fall through the building, and it creates in the bottom a massive heap. Now that's fine, and if you're going for complete realism, then that's a really great thing to aim for. But in reality, we've got to push rhinos and marines and terminators and dreadnoughts all the way through this board, and it doesn't quite work, in my opinion. You know, if you can prove me wrong, that's great. Send us a photo, I'd love to see it. But it doesn't quite work, particularly if you're trying to create a fast-moving battlefield. You know, you don't want to get bogged down with wobbly model and all that jazz. So what I've got, some really small pieces here, and I'm just going to heap them in the corners of this first floor, just to create a little bit of extra interest and detail. Again, a little bit more of this stuff, just to blend the two together. Good. Now, what you could do, of course, if you wanted to create a snowboard, instead of mixing the salt and this aggregate together, you wouldn't be able to separate it, so you'd have to chuck them both. You could just put the stone down and then pour the salt on top, and that would work. And again, it would do the same job as the black aggregate here, which is blending the two surfaces together. And it works really well. And we've done it a few times on the channel as well. Equally, if you wanted to represent that this building was on the outskirts of a desert type city, you know, boring grey buildings against the backdrop of bright yellow or orange sand, then that would work really well. The contrast is great. And I've also done that before as well. I remember doing it in particular, there was a massive battle between Kim Sanderberg and Benjamin Yip. They both had a Reaver Titan each. It was, I'm trying to remember the forces, Mechanicum versus Iron Warriors with the Reaver in support. And it was done on a massive 8x6 board. And the city tiles were put at an angle, so we had a 6x4 at a complete angle, and then the rest of it was filled in with Foamex and rock, and then the red sand was placed over top, and it made an amazing effect. It looked really, really cool. I thought it looked cool. So I just want a little bit more on here. Lovely. That looks good. And again, you know, we can put some barrels in here, we can put some ammo crates, you know, just to create that little extra realism here to show that, you know, it's a hard fought city, and people have been battling over it. I think that is it. I've got a couple of Marines. I'm going to reach into the front and beyond the camera so you guys can't see that. And I've got some yellow Marines here in the colours of the Imperial Fists. So they've got orange bases, so we're going to dip in them a little bit of aggregate just to make them darker. Need a little bit more maybe. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. And then on the steps, defending, maybe one just poking through the door there. Maybe a couple more. Sorry about reaching through. Does look pretty cool. Oh, I lost all the aggregate there. There we go. You know, and like I said before, if you haven't got the facility to do this in your battle boards, you can also just set it up just to take some photos of your Marines or your Solar Auxiliary or your Militia or whatever you've got, Mechanicum, and it's just a really, really fun exercise. I think that's really good. Obviously, it's quite tall here. I can't quite see it. We'll stick the roof on just to finish off the effect. Yeah, that looks good. And that is it, I think. That's your lot. I'm just going to quickly clear down the old aggregate here. And that is your board. You know, and you can imagine you've got the entire set from Forge World, 6 tiles, and then you've got the 7th one, which is the landing pad. So you can mix and match those tiles in as much as you want. But the great thing about City Fight is it does present a really tight and claustrophobic battlefield, and it's all about infantry moving through those buildings and getting into grips with their crack grenades on the rear of Sicarans and Vindicators and Rhinos and whatever else. And they're a really, really fun game to play. And I think one thing that the battlefield needs is big, tall terrain and tons of infantry, because infantry move through the board a lot easier. They can hunker down in buildings for when a Fire Raptor comes in with its twin Punisher cannons. And it's waist-mounted autocannons and stuff. So, you know, it's well worth spending that little bit of extra time and effort to build your City Fight board. That is it. I know it was short and sweet, but I hope it was useful. You know, these buildings are really, really great. So if you haven't seen them already, go to the website. I'll put a link in the description below for you guys to have a look at that. Griff is also on Instagram. It's just at Unreal Wargaming Studios. So please go there and have a look. I really hope you've enjoyed this. Any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'll endeavour to answer as much as I can. Failing that, if you've got a burning question, you can email me direct at david@the30kchannel.com. Of course, social media, you know all about that. That's where I am. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Firefight.